And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And, excuse me, in this fourth segment, we are going to talk about whether or not the first round bye in the college football playoffs is a pro or is it a con? Because there's been a lot of talk, and there's been a lot of speculation as to whether or not there is an advantage in having the first round bye in these college football playoffs, just based off of the results of the most recent matchup. Before I do that, however, I did talk about the All-Star game and the All-Star voting. I want to point out that right now, recently, Norman Powell is averaging more points per game, a better field goal percentage from both the field and in the three-point line than Stephen Curry, and yet Norman Powell has way smaller votes, like fewer votes than Steph. So I just want to point that out, and I also should point out that Norman Powell ended up recording 6 points and 6 turnovers, going 1 for 11 after that graphic was posted. So a little bit funny, but let's get back to these college football playoffs. So as you guys are very well aware, let me just bring it up. Give me 1 second. There we go. So as you guys already know, I talked about this in the first segment, but every single one of the teams that had a first round bye in the college football playoffs ended up losing. Every single one of them. Oregon, they ended up getting destroyed in the matchup against Ohio State. University of Georgia, they ended up not getting as badly destroyed as Oregon did, but still, it wasn't really that close of a game. And, of course, Boise State, they ended up getting... Now, the game looked a little bit closer than, based off of the final score, the game looked a little bit closer than what it actually was. But, to me, the game was never really all that close between Penn State and Boise State. So, why is this? Is there, a reason for it? Because it doesn't really make all that much sense. However, I will say that... the only advantage, really, that there is to not having the first round bye is that the players are already warmed up, because all of these teams, Oregon, Arizona, and I didn't even mention Arizona, because Arizona actually played a very competent game against Texas. Now, they were down by a lot in the first half, but they ended up almost coming back in the very end. But, again... that being said, Texas ended up beating them, and Arizona ended up getting the first round bye, so every single team ended up losing after getting the first round bye. So why is that? And as I was saying, the speculation is that teams are warmed up. Excuse me. Notre Dame, they played a game before playing the University of Georgia. Penn State, they played a game before playing Boise State. Texas, they played a game. Ohio State, they played a game, right? So these teams... they were already, the thought process is that teams were already warmed up, and because they were warmed up, they were able to be better suited for this game than the opposing matchup, because none of the first seeded teams, they had a month off before playing their first football game in the college football playoffs, right? So... while I do understand, the thought process with that, and while I'm not going to sit here and say that that doesn't make any sense, I don't think that's really a legitimate argument. Personally, I don't think that's a good argument at all. The teams that had the first round bye, they have a whole month to prepare for this game. Whether or not they're using that month responsibly is on them. I'm sorry to say this, but... at this point, you already know you're going to be playing a very tough team, and you already know that you're going to need everything that you can get. So you should, a month to prepare for whichever matchup you have to go against. I think it's more than enough to allow them to win this game. I don't think you necessarily need to play a game before you end up... I don't think you need to play a game before the big game that you need to win. And not only that, I genuinely think that each of the teams that ended up losing in a blowout loss, like each of like Oregon, University of Georgia, and Boise State, I think each of those teams have a legitimate reason as to why they ended up losing in a blowout. The only team that did not have a legitimate reason was Arizona, and Arizona almost ended up winning this game. And they proved that they belonged in the first round bye, and they proved that you can make a game very competitive despite having the first round bye. Like, they proved that already. So the fact that they didn't win is a different story because, I mean, one thing leads to another, and the quarterback throws a bad pass at a bad time. That happens every single time in the postseason. That happens to at least one team in the postseason almost every single time. But the rest of the teams, so for example, we'll start with Oregon since they did not lose a single game. When you do not lose a single game, you can argue that it's more difficult to complete the flawless season and actually win in the very end as opposed to if you were to lose a game in the regular season and then continue on. Because there's a lot of pressure that goes into maintaining that flawless record. Remember back in 2007 when the Patriots, they were flawless throughout the entirety of the regular season and they could not beat the Giants. Like, that pressure is ultimately going to get to a lot of these players, especially the players in college. So maintaining that flawless record, it might have been better if Oregon actually lost a game before they ended up making it to the college football playoffs to show them that, okay, we are definitely a team that can still end up losing, and we're a team that needs a lot of work to be done. Because when you lose, like when you win all the time, it's very, very difficult to pickpocket what you're doing wrong. It's very difficult to pick apart what you're doing wrong in a lot of these games because you're winning. Like, if you're winning, then obviously what you're doing is working. And it's until you don't win where, okay, you realize you have a little bit of a problem, right? So I think that's a big reason why Oregon ended up losing. And also, another reason why I think they lost this game was because Ohio State ended up losing to Oregon in the last time. And they lost by a touchdown, I believe. And when Ohio State, when they lose to a team, unless it's Michigan, like when they lost to Oregon, they most definitely went into the locker room and they definitely studied a lot of film. They looked at what they did wrong and they made sure to minimize those mistakes going into this game. So they had way more prep for this game, and they also had more motivation to try and win this game. Because you could look at Oregon and be like, oh, we already beat Ohio State. All we got to do is do this, that, and the other, like what we did in the last game. And Ohio State is in there thinking, these guys beat us last time. We got to show them exactly who we are in this game and prove that last game was a fluke, right? Like, that's the mentality that Ohio State was probably going into in that game. And they were much more motivated to beat them than they were in the regular season, right? I think that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if you guys think that makes sense. Now, the University of Georgia, their starting quarterback wasn't playing. Carson Beck was injured, and he was not playing in this game, so they had to leave the game up to a sophomore quarterback. While he did not play bad, obviously leaving the game up to a sophomore quarterback is very risky, especially in a game of this magnitude. Pressure is going to get to this quarterback, especially since he did not really play all that much throughout the regular season. In fact, the only stats that he recorded in the regular season, like he did not record a single touchdown in the regular season. He recorded just one interception and around 258 yards. Like, that is not a quarterback that is going to propel you to win in the college football playoffs, regardless whether it is a 14 playoff bracket or a 16-team playoff bracket. That's just not how it's going to work. And that's just at least a 12-team playoff bracket. Excuse me. That's just the reality of the situation. And like, I did not think that the University of Georgia was going to win with their backup quarterback. Now, maybe with Carson Beck they had a chance. Now, I'm not saying that Carson Beck is a great quarterback in college football. I genuinely do not think he's a great quarterback. But I definitely think that if he was in the game would have been much more competitive. Whether they would have won or not is a completely different story. And then finally, you have Boise State and their loss to Penn State. Simply put, Boise State's only played one competent opponent, and that was Oregon. They don't have enough experience playing enough competent teams in order to prepare themselves properly for this game. Their game plan was give the ball to Ashton Genty. Guess what? Everyone knows that that's their game plan. Penn State knows that that's their game plan, and Penn State has had a great run defense. So the matchup was perfect in favor of Penn State. And that's the reason why Boise State ended up losing this game in the end, in my opinion. And it's not like this is an out of, something that just doesn't happen, because this also happens quite a lot in the NFL, at least, going off of recent memory. I'm actually going to go ahead and pull up the list real quick. Give me 1 second. So since 1995, there have been 15 teams that have lost in the divisional round after they got a first round bye. The Chiefs lost in 95, the Broncos lost to the Jaguars in 96, the Chiefs lost to the Broncos in 97, the Titans, they lost to the Ravens in 2000, Colts, they lost to the Steelers in 2005 with Peyton Manning. The Chargers, they lost to the Patriots in 2006. In 2007, the Cowboys lost to the Giants. In 2008, the Titans lost to the Ravens. In 2008, the Giants lost to the Eagles. In 2010, the Patriots lost to the Jets. In 2010, the Falcons ended up losing to the Packers in a 48-21 win. In 2011, the Packers, as I mentioned before, they lost to the Giants. In 2012, the Broncos, they lost to the Ravens. In 2016, the Cowboys, they lost to the Packers. Beautiful game, by the way. In 2019, the Ravens ended up losing to the Titans. So it happens a lot. The teams that have a first-round bye, they tend to lose sometimes in the divisional round. It happens. It's a normal thing. And in these matchups in college football, specifically these three, there were legitimate reasons as to why they ended up losing and why the score was so one-sided. And this one right here, I mean, the score was, again, it was really, really close. And I really think that this is probably going to be remembered as the best game in the entirety of the college football playoffs, at least so far. I don't think there's really been a close second. This was by far the best game of the college football playoffs right now. And there were reasons why this game was so close. And again, while it didn't start out all that well, the coach on Arizona made some very, very good play calling at the very end of the game, and that ultimately led to them tying. And also the Texas Longhorns, they ended up missing two really important field goals, which most likely would have put the game away. But again, mistakes and accidents happen. But that's my reason why these games ended up being in a big blowout. And I really don't think that there is a pro. I don't think there is a con to the first round bye. I just think that the matchups, they worked much better for the team that didn't have the first round bye, more so than it was that the first round bye gave these teams too long of a break. I do not think that's the reason at all. And I mean, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Let me know if you guys agree with me. Let me know if you guys completely disagree with me and think that the first round bye actually does take effect on some of these teams. But again, a whole month to prepare for your matchup, there's zero excuse. You have two teams that you're most likely going to play, without a doubt. So you already know in advance which of those two teams you're going to play, and you just create a game plan for both of those teams, and you memorize that game plan. Obviously, easier said than done. I'm not trying to say that this is something that these players should have done, but it's these are the steps that are put into place, and you just have to make sure you do a good job in prepping your boys to make sure that they're ready to play in whichever opponent. And then when the game finally concludes, you get ready for the team that you're going to beat. It's a huge advantage having a month in advance to prepare for your team that you're going up against, as opposed to having just a week's notice compared to Ohio State. Granted, Ohio State, they probably had much longer to prep for this game because they already had the game plan put into place and why they lost to Oregon the last time, which again helps them in their matchups. But again, let me know in the comments what you guys think. So We're going to go ahead and get into the final segment after this short break, where I talk about the NBA's power rankings that were released earlier this week on Monday. I did not get to talk about them in the last podcast that I did, so I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.